Hi, I'm Symphoneers, and today we're taking a look at card design in Lost Caverns of Ixalan. Only I thought instead of doing a bloated set review, it would be more interesting to talk about how I feel the set is indicative of a positive, kind of general design trend at Wizards of the Coast. I'll need to talk about older cards for a few minutes first before I get into the fun new Ixalan cards, so let's get into it. So the buzzword plaguing talk surrounding Magic card design for the past couple of years has been fire. It's the design philosophy Wizards of the Coast has been using to guide card design since about 2019, and it's been the target of a lot of criticism. The kind of boilerplate reason being that nothing says fun, inviting, replayable, and exciting like Uro and Oko inviting your opponent to concede. Mark Rosewater feels that fire gets undue criticism, and I would actually mostly agree. For example, I think cards being inviting or inclusive is unambiguously a good thing, and it's like part of what made me interested in making Magic content in the first place. It's also deeply unconnected to whether or not Oko or Uro is a powerful Magic card, or the fun in Fire. Well, I actually have a lot of issues with how this kind of gets implemented and affects the printing of things like land destruction or discard. I think the basic goal of having like, hey, our gameplay should be compelling and, you know, interesting, I think that's a good goal for literally any game to have. And it's not, again, not deeply connected to, you know, Uro being the way Uro is. Getting to the point, the part where I'd disagree with Mark is exciting. While Commander precons have existed since 2011, I think 2019 and Fire design more or less correspond to Commander's ascension as a format and Wizards designing for it correspondingly, with a massive increase in the number of Commander products each year, and the kind of sphere of Commander's design influence expanding beyond products that are made for it into the design of things like standard sets. There are literal checks and balances in place at Wizards to make sure that this happens, like the Commander Advisory Group consulting on cards and set design. But this starts to run into problems, because Commander is its own format. It has its own distinct incentives. Most simply, you need to deal with 2 additional players when you're playing Commander, and this incentivizes go-big strategies, resource-intensive strategies, things that can compete at the table. Not even necessarily to be competitive, just have a good time at the table, decent odds of winning, and so on. So how do you make cards that fit that design goal, but print them in a standard set? I think Uro, Oko, Field of the Dead, Fire's Invention, whatever you want to pick on, represent kind of the most brute force, inelegant, you know, weak or poorly designed attempts at doing this. They're advantage engines that are difficult to interact with, and that makes them rough in a 1-versus-1 format, but in a 4-player format where there's 2 additional players who share the responsibility of dealing with any given threat, and the quality of interaction is higher, you know, Swords to Plowshares or whatever, they become a lot more fair, a lot more, you know, reasonable. In this way, their design is just actually, like, quite weak or quite poor. They just totally ignore the constrictions or the restraints of the format that they're supposedly designed for in favor of feeding into Commander. They just do not really care about how they affect a 60-card format. They've only been beat by companions, you know, Commander's attempt to just straight up eat 60-card formats, especially pre-errata. I could talk about how bad their design is for an hour. For the purposes of this video, companions just represent a complete disregard for the conceptual and, like, you know, game design core of 60-card formats, as well as a willingness to push power level hard enough to ensure that they see play. Let's talk about another design mistake I can use to pivot into actually being positive and talking about Ixalan cards. Secret Rendezvous. I hate Secret Rendezvous. In Commander, cards like Secret Rendezvous are compelling because they accelerate the game state as a whole, and they also allow for some politicking. It's a great card for that format, genuinely, like, no problem with it. is fun. Why was it printed in a standard set? The kind of game theory behind spending mana to draw your opponent cards means it is strictly incorrect to cast under any kind of normal circumstances, and I think it serves 1 versus 1 formats more poorly than even something like 1 with nothing. So what's Ixalan's answer to a group huggy, white card draw spell when you want to put one of those in a standard set? Contested Game Ball. Right off the bat, it's a lot more interactive than Secret Rendezvous with its kind of bad monarch effect, allowing the ball to be kicked around the table and for everyone to engage in politicking. It encourages combat. It helps spread out the game acceleration, assuming that, people have early board development. It's fun. It seems genuinely fun in that format and kind of more compelling in terms of how it affects gameplay than Secret Rendezvous just being like, I, the group hug player, randomly can make you. While I don't expect Contested Game Ball to be very good in single-player formats, I do think it at least merits consideration in a way that Secret Rendezvous doesn't. In particular, as like a sideboard option versus control decks or other things that aren't fielding a lot of creatures, just because it is in kind of the mold of a Reckoner Bankbuster or a Maze Mind Tome, letting you accrue advantage over multiple turns using something that can't be hit by normal spot removal. So, thumbs up. It at least merits a little bit of consideration for broad use in a single player format in a way that Secret Rendezvous just does not at all. The gods are also worth briefly mentioning. I already have a full video talking about how cool and good I think O'Hare Ashenel's design is, so I won't go super deep on them, but I did want to kind of A-B compare them against Uro. Uro is this kind of self-contained advantage machine. He chops, he slices, he dices. Well, the Ixalan gods do have some similarities to Uro. They're large creatures, they're removal resilient, etc. They are not actually that strong on their own. They're fine, but their big strength lies in helping your deck do its primary game plan more effectively, more powerfully. They need additional support. Pair that with the slightly higher mana costs, and you have these card designs that are still very exciting and still very powerful, but they are a lot less inherently dangerous because they scale with the power of the format. They multiply the power of the rest of the stuff you're doing, and Standard only has limited options, Commander has much better options, you get the idea. Meanwhile, Uro is just, always cranked to 11 doing Uro things. If you really wanted to kind of nitpick or dive a little bit deeper on this comparison, O'Hare Caslem is probably the closest to Uro, being a large green creature that can put lands into play, and so on. Although even then, its attack trigger is a lot more restrictive, and it really wants you to build your deck in a certain way to help ensure that it can actually connect with combat damage, that it's connecting with a good amount of combat damage so you see the largest number of cards possible, and you can do whatever cheeky thing you're doing with it, and so on. So even the thing that looks the most Uro-y still wants you to do real specific stuff. It doesn't as neatly fit into a random kind of value or control deck. One of the most interesting design things to me personally is how they've been handling the printing of cheap, efficient cards. Like this set, we are getting a Bone Splitter in the form of Dire Flail. Not just a Bone Splitter with additional utility, additional upside. This is kind of wild to me just because they've printed so many bad Bone Splitters over the years. WotC knows that the people love Bone Splitter, the people demand Bone Splitter, but colorless artifacts being strong has a homogenizing effect on formats, decks, gameplay, and generally these yada 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 yada. Which is not wrong, but it does lead to the question, okay, why was the solution to that to print boring, unplayable cards, Wizards designers being a little slow but decent at their jobs, start experimenting with ways to power artifacts back up without having those same design issues. Most notably with the return to Kamigawa being absolutely littered with colored artifacts. While I think that aspect of artifacts in Kamigawa was largely unremarkable in that set, I think we're starting to see the fruits, the benefits of that experimentation here in Dire Flail and similar artifacts. We're getting Fire Design, we're getting this card that's specifically specifically trying to push power level and to do something, strong and exciting. Only instead of being 2019 Fire design, where it's sheer utter maximalism for no reason except like, hey, this seems fun in Commander or whatever, it's instead, pushing the power level in a way that's tied to the history and informed by the mistakes of older card design. It's not sheer utter maximalist power crept design just for the sake of selling cardboard. It's actually trying to offer the good, refined, exciting version of equipment gameplay in 2023. There's a couple cards in this set that are remarkably similar in that regard. Mephitic Draft is an Ichor Wellspring if you're willing to take some damage and play black. Greedy Freebooter looks to be a fixed Shambling Ghast, leaning even further into the thing that made Shambling Ghast a unique and interesting bit of sack fodder in the Treasure on Death, supporting that with a Scry, but cutting back on the flexibility a little bit. We have Get Lost, a Fateful Absence that is more flexible and gives your opponent worse, specifically more conditional consolation. We have Kitesail Larcenist, a brutal Cathar, or whatever you want to call this type of creature in blue, that just has a bunch of additional keywords and things. The kind of most notable thing about it being that it is in a color that doesn't usually have access to this pretty good effect. There's also Spyglass Siren, which is just another 1-drop in the cycle of Thraben Inspector, Voldaren Epicure. This is an extremely good, efficient 1-drop that will see play just, everywhere in things that want to make early permanents and artifacts and yada yada yada. I'm sure there's even more cards that I'm forgetting to list that fit into that general design mold, but I just wanted to move on from that and, talk about some things that I'm generally excited for with Lost Caverns of Ixalan. Thousand Moon Smithy. Better constructs? Oh, amazing. Incredible. This is a card that I'm happy to have in Standard, just because, you can blink it and maybe meme and do some stuff with it, but even if you don't, I think it's still just very good and powerful. I like having more support for a construct type of strategy in Standard, just because that's something that is so present in older formats of Magic. I think it's nice to see this kind of making an appearance. Speaking of artifacts that will kill people, Dowsing Device. Oh, love it. No notes. Just slap it in a artifacts deck with Patchwork Automaton and Reinforced Ronin or something. The speedrun turning control players to dust. General shout out to all the Discover cards. Having seen the set now, I think they look, interesting, exciting, playable without being super oppressive or gross or whatever. One of the play patterns I'm most excited for with them is just playing a Trumpeting Carnosaur and discovering a Polani's Hatcher, just because that's so much, haste, trample, dinosaur power and stuff, and oh, seems good. Speaking of good dinos, it's Quinth, a baby that's a fight spell. Oh, tremendous. We're also getting Belligerent Yearling, which is a card that, scales up if you play other more powerful dinos. It's most funny if you curve it into a Pugnacious Hammerskull and it's swinging in, for 6 damage trampling on turn 3. I don't even know if that'll be that good or that, playable in Standard or whatever with how much removal is floating around. It's just funny though, or I'm definitely gonna try it. General shout out to all the Merfolk support. I was definitely hoping for another Lord to complement Vodalian Hexcatcher, but in the absence of that and very many strong big tentpole cards, aside from Tishana's Tidebinder, or the green one that spits out map tokens, I will have it on screen now. Most of them just hit this really nice kind of baseline of, hey, what if we put Efficient Explorer on a pretty okay body? And it's just great. I will take a lot of broad support, a lot of, reasonably playable, decent cards, and just, I don't know, maybe try to do a Soldiers thing or whatever, or Soldiers in Standard works in that way right now where they don't have a lot of Lords either. They have the one, and then they have a lot of, just solid playables. So I'll take it. I'm happy with it. To go back to Fire design for a second, I think it's the type of power creep or power pushing that's actually fun and productive. To say that, hey, why don't we bring the floor up, make all this stuff, pretty good, maybe not wildly exciting, maybe not backbreaking as an individual card, but just feels good to play. Why don't we make everything feel decent instead of sucking? And it's yeah, yeah, good plan. I like it. Or at least it's a lot better than printing, you know, turbo-pushed, inaccessible mythics that warp formats and are extremely unfun to deal with. Holy shit, a Nimpekal. Move over, Adeline. This lady outscales you and has artifact synergies. Just... I don't know what that noise is, but... Have you seen this card? Honorable mention to playing a Hit the Mother Load with a Captain Storm out. I mentioned a play pattern like this in the early kind of spoilers video I did, and I'm just happy to have on-color support for this play pattern in Captain Storm. It's just very funny to, like, you know, hit the Mother Load, hit a 2-drop or whatever, Captain Storm turns into a 10-drop, or math is hard. Gets real swole and kills people. It seems fun. It's a unique way to build around Hit the Mother Load anyway, so I'm happy to have some kind of on-color or on-plan support for that whole thing. Speaking of Izzet cards, we're getting the Belligerent, a kind of weird future sight, and I always just love weird future sights. It's notably 4 mana, which is nice, although I think it might be best in like a kind of weird tempo combo deck. In particular, it is a nice thing to cheat in off of Malcolm, like getting that boat for free. Love it. And you can also just play it fairly, and then once you have it down, maybe rip some buried treasures off of the top of your deck, combo into something. Maybe there's an enthusiastic Mechanaut around, just making a bunch of stuff cheaper. I don't know. It seems neat. I'm gonna try some stuff with it. Shrug, shrug. And that's the end of my notes for this video, so let me just leave you with Cogwork Wrestler. What a good little guy. If you liked this video, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, etc. Just do anything to let me know that I should do more of this. It is a little bit more work than what I usually do, so yeah, you know. Let me know. Also, a little bit of channel bookkeeping. YouTube has apparently made it way easier to give YouTube members early access to videos, so let me know if that's something that you would like, or that like might help you as a non-YouTube member, might make you more interested in supporting the channel financially and stuff. Just cause, yeah, that I tend to put out videos anywhere between a like day or two before, like upload them a day or two before they go live, all the way to like 2 weeks before they go live. So it's a notable or real benefit. I do also have a Patreon. I'm not sure if I'll be able to give patrons the same early video access or like use the same thing to do that. But patrons get other stuff that YouTube members don't too, so it's kind of fine-ish or balances out. Like, patrons have access to a audio-only version of the Lost Caverns of Ixalan audiobook that I produced, so you know, I kind of like the asymmetry, honestly, although I know it might be a little bit confusing for viewers, and Oh, and I did get into the streamer event again for this set, so stop by if you're seeing this when this video goes live. Stop by Friday, you know, this week on Twitch and say hello. I'll be playing viewer-submitted decks again, probably. I don't know if I'll be brewing any of my own this time. I usually don't get to everyone's submissions, so but yeah, we'll see. It'll be fun anyway. I always enjoy playing in early access. Anyway, I think that's everything. Thank you for watching. Hope you have a wonderful day. Bye-bye. Thank you for watching the video, and an extra big thank you to the Patreon patrons and YouTube members that help make these videos possible. Hope you have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.